Amen. Well, good morning again, everyone. If you missed it, my name is Collin. I'm the student pastor here. And so we've been, at the end of our messages, we've kind of been making space throughout this series for a special time of reflection at the end of the service during our worship set. And so today is no different. I want to let you know we are going to do that. But today is a little different because we've been sort of making times of reflection the past few weeks. And today we're just going to make a time to be able to celebrate together. So we're going to invite you to come down and do that because this morning we are talking about joy. Joy. Did you guys know that yet? Did you guys catch on to that? We are talking about joy. So joy, like every other thing that we've talked about this past series, peace and hope, it seems like joy is one of those things as well that like it's so elusive sometimes. Like we talk about it like, yeah, like I know about it. Like I've heard of that fabled joy before. Like, yeah, I know we're supposed to have it. And guess what? I want it. I want it, obviously. But you know what? Like especially in times like these, in seasons like the Christmas season, it is just so hard to come by. It seems like it's in such short supply. So we kind of settle for sort of, like, okay, you know what? I'm going to take a hit of joy whenever I can. You know what I mean? Like whenever situation I'm in, like if there's a little bit of joy to get, I'll take some of that. And then what we'll do is kind of we talk like we're in email. But let's just circle back to joy after the season, right? After Christmas, let's circle back. Why don't we and come back to joy? Because right now it's just I don't know. It's nowhere to be found. It's so hard to come by. And here's the thing. There's a small problem with that. It's called the Bible. Let's see what that problem might be. Psalm chapter 16, verse 11. I'm going to be reading the ESV for this verse. But here's what it says. It says, "You make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore." Okay, so there's some pretty big topics in this verse. Like this is not like one of those like, in the morning you'll have breakfast and it'll be good. Like this is a big verse. So we're talking about the path of life here, right? Raise your hand if you would like God to just kind of show you the path of your life. That would be nice. That would be easy. I would go for that. So, we're talking about really big things. We're talking about the fullness of joy, pleasures, forevermore. Like these are huge things. And so, we look at a season like this, like joy is in such short supply, peace, such short supply. I don't think I can expect to be able to really receive these things. But then we read a verse like this and we say, okay, so this is talking about my whole life. Like not just the slow seasons, right? Because those exist. Not just like when things calm down and I can actually take a breath, but like this is saying throughout my whole, you show me the path of life. And in your presence, there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. So during all of my life, our fullest joy comes from God's presence. For all of my life, fullest joy. The fullness of joy is experienced in God's presence. So here's like 100%. That's what it's saying. 100% of joy is found in the presence of God. It's not like I go over here and I'll do my quiet time and I'll spend my time, getting to know Jesus and building that. And so I've got a lot of joy banked up here, and then I got to make sure I go over here and kind of find the rest and search it. No, 100%, all of the joy that is possible, the fullness of joy is found in the presence of God. Now, he says, not the same thing as me saying that if you are not a believer, if you're not a Christian, that you are unable to experience joy. Because that is not true. You can absolutely experience joy. Like everyone does on a daily basis. That's just the grace of God. But here's the thing. The fullness of joy, that's only in the presence of God. The fullness of joy, the only place where we can experience joy the way that God intended us to experience it when he created us is in his presence. And so you say, okay, great. Well, why then are Christians sometimes the most miserly, grumpy, grinchy Scrooges that are around? Why is that? Why do we have people that it seems like, the person that's at the store making a commotion, right? Like you're like, what is their problem? Then you go out and you see the fish on the back of the car, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, why is that? Like, why? Now here's the thing. I'm not here to have a defense for that, because it's a great question. It is a valid question. Why does that seem to be? Because if we believe what we say we believe, that Jesus came here for us, to die for us, he was buried, he rose again, we have the least excuse to walk around being little miserly curmudgeons all the time. We should be leading the world in joy. Why? Because God is in you if you are a believer. If you have accepted Christ and what he did for you, God says, I've put my spirit in you. My presence is with you always. It goes where you go. It lies where, it is always with you. You have access to the fullness of joy at all times. This is true about believers. And so what should this actually look like? If our greatest joy comes from God's presence in our lives, then our joy should mirror God's presence as much as it can. So here's what I mean by that. A few things about God's presence. God's presence is constant. It's always there. Now here's the thing. Our awareness of God's presence is not always constant, but God's presence is always constant. His presence is a promise that he makes to us. He said, I will be there. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. I will always be there with you. His presence is constant. It doesn't stop. God's presence is something that we cultivate. So yeah, it's always there. But again, we don't always experience it. Sometimes we have to cultivate and do rhythms and practices that help us to experience the presence of God, even though it's always there. We need to take step towards him too. Last, God's presence is communal and it's corporate. It's not just a personal thing that we experience on our own. It's something that we can experience when we're face to face. It's something we can experience when we're in a room like this. The presence of God is communal and it's corporate. So if our fullest joy comes from God's presence, that means that our joy should be constant, cultivated, communal, and corporate. So let's talk about that first one. Philippians 4:4. What does it say? Pretty simple verse. Always be full of joy in the Lord. I say it again, rejoice. Always be. Okay, so really though, when you say constant, do you mean constant? Is that are you using that word the way that I think you're using that word? Constant? Okay, cool. So let me know how that works for you, right? You might be like, listen, I'll even come back. I'll come to the Christmas services just to see if the joy in your life has been constant, Pastor Collin. I'll come back just to see if that checks out for you in this short time span. So when you say constant, so what is that supposed to look like? Are we supposed to just walk around like creepy Jack Nicholsons all the time, with that weird smile, This is the Christian life right here? Is this it? Am I doing it? Am I doing it? Am I living it? Is this the Christian life? What do you mean it's supposed to be constant? What in the world does that look like? Spoiler alert, not that. So it's okay. Not that. You don't got to walk around with that creepy smile. But have you ever noticed how we kind of we pit joy and happiness together sometimes? And a lot of times we'll do this kind of from the pulpit. And happiness is bad. You don't want to be happy. You want to be joyful, right? But that's not how the Bible talks about it. I kind of understand, when I understand the illustration. It can work well if you use it right. But here's the thing, a lot of times we'll kind of take those things and we'll say happiness is bad. But joy is good. And that's not what the Bible teaches. What I do think the Bible teaches is that happiness is good in the right situation. Why is Jack Nicholson's smile creepy all the time? Because he's smiling when he shouldn't be smiling. That's why you look creepy. You want to know why you're smiling when you should not be smiling right now? This is a weird situation, right? Okay, cool. So dog just bit my face. Lost my job. Third one this month, right? Oh, man. Looks like we lost grandma again. Oh, geez. That reindeer, man, she didn't see it coming. Oh, geez, gosh. Right? So it's like, why are you happy? Why are you happy right now? This is creepy. This is weird. If this is the Christian life, I'm good. I'm fine. I'll just back out here and live in the shadows because that's weird. But see, happiness is good in the right situation. Joy, I think the Bible teaches, is good all of the time. Here's what I mean by that. See, there's things that should always be present in the life of a believer. A lot of things that we've talked about: peace, hope, joy, love, faith. Like, these are things that are always in the life of the believer. But here's the thing about them: they're shapeshifters. So it's not that they're tools that we kind of pull out of the tool belt when we need them. They're things that are always there, but they look different in this situation and in this situation. So my faith in this situation might look like, you know what? I don't know what's up there. It's foggy. It's unclear. But God is asking me to go, and so I'm going to go because I've got faith in him. Other times it looks like, you know what? I don't know what's happened. I don't know what I need to wait for the Lord. I need to wait to hear what God is asking me to do. Faith looks different from situation to situation. Peace looks different from situation to situation. Sometimes it looks like you're going crazy, you're doing everything, but you've got this quiet presence in your soul. And other times it looks like I'm still because I've got the quiet presence in my soul. It looks different from moment to moment, situation to situation. Sometimes joy looks like intense happiness. And you're saying, I don't know what to do with this other than to just let it out. And sometimes it's the creepy smile. You're just like, you know what? You're gonna have to deal with this because it's everything. Things are going great. Like, sometimes I have to let this out. I've got to jump around. I've got to dance. I've got to shout. I've got to do something. And sometimes joy looks like sorrow and grief mixed with hope. It's a shapeshifter. In 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 10, Paul's sharing about the difficulties that he faces as a minister and as a church planner, and he says, our hearts ache, but we always have joy. Sometimes our hearts ache, but he says, but we've always got joy, because in this moment, joy looks like this, and in this moment, joy looks different. It's not constant happiness, constant joy. Because it's joy that is always accessible because it comes from God's constant presence. Now again, just like his presence, just because joy is constant does not mean that we're always experiencing it. That means joy, a lot of times, needs to be cultivated. And I need to learn how to drink water out of a bottle. Joy needs to be cultivated. See, far too often we allow ourselves to grow numb to the presence of God in our lives. And so what that does is we're not just numb to God's presence, but then we're also growing numb to the things that presence brings. So we grow numb to God's presence in our lives, and we're now no longer able to really find joy in certain circumstances and situations. Even joy where it's like it's obvious that this joy should look big and happy and good, but it's just like, I don't know. Or times where it's like, man, I know this is difficult, but you can have joy in this moment. If we're growing numb to God's presence, we're not able to really do anything with that. And so just like God's presence, joy is no different than that. It's why, like we've already read in Philippians 4, we are commanded, this is weird, commanded to have joy. You're gonna be joyful, and you're gonna like it, right? Like, that's the Bible. I think that was the Message version. That's a weird statement, because it's like, you're gonna like it, and you're gonna like it. You know, like, it's like those are, yeah, like we're commanded to have joy. It doesn't say, hey, are you joyful? No. You tried yoga? Like, you know what? No, it just says, be joyful. When? Always. Be joyful always. And he's like, I'll say it again in case you missed it. Rejoice. It is a command. He's saying, listen, you need to cultivate joy in your life. It is always there. God's presence is with you, which means his joy should be with you. But there's times in your life where you're going to need to cultivate and garden that. Because it's not that everything is going to go your way. It's not that it's going to be roses all the time. It's that you are in control of your joy, not your circumstances. You don't have to be in control of your circumstances to have joy, because your joy is a slave to you and not your circumstances. Your joy is a slave to you, not the things that you are going through. You are the one who cultivates the joy that Jesus has given to you. Like we've mentioned, there can and should be joy in whatever affliction or hardship that you're going through. That's why James writes in the first chapter of his book, right at the beginning, "Dear brothers and sisters, when trouble of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great" what? Joy. Absolutely. There are times when we have to be able to cultivate joy in negative circumstances. But listen, overwhelmingly in Scripture, the ideal disposition of the Christian is victorious rejoicing. Overwhelmingly. The majority of the times where we see joy in the Scriptures, it's not, I know it's tough, but hang on, you can have joy. I know you're almost fall off the stage right there, but you could still be joyful if it happened. Like, I know this is hard for you, but there can be joy. No, that's there. But the majority of the time, overwhelmingly, is that joy is found in victorious rejoicing over your relationship with Jesus, over what he has done for you, over the fact that God's presence is with you, that God's presence is in you, that God's presence doesn't leave you. That is the overwhelming reality for believers. Of course, that's not all the time. We can't live that way. Our adrenal glands would be out in like 2 weeks. We can't do that. But if you're always mad, if you're always sad, if you're always depressed, if you're all, well, you know what? I'm frustrated, but I'm following Jesus. If that's the majority of your life, you're not living the life of joy that God has created and called you to live. Please understand, I'm not saying that you move past hurts or trauma or frustrations too quickly. And definitely don't ignore them altogether. That is not what I'm saying. We have to be able to deal with these things. But a lot of times what we do is we look at these and we deal with them and we interact with them and we struggle with them. And then we find ourselves finding excuses to stay there rather than to move out of that in a healthy way. Find excuses to be joyful. Go and hunt for joy in your life. Cultivate that joy. We talked about gardening. Sometimes you have to get down in the dirt where it's really difficult. Anyone ever grown things out of the ground? Like I go to Publix. I don't like Paige is doing a lot of, that's my wife. She's doing a lot of like gardening, like planting flowers and stuff. And she's doing great, but man, that's hard. I would rather pay someone to do that than to do all of that. Gardening is difficult. It's hard. So is joy sometimes. Joy is constant. It's not always easy. It's not always easy. You might be in a time in your life where joy is very, very difficult for you right now. And that's okay. You can work in that. But what does it look like for you to cultivate joy throughout that? Again, is it sorrow and grief mixed with hope for you right now? Are you moving toward being able to rejoice? Because here's the thing about our God is that he is a God of miracles. He is a God of hope. He is a God who wins. He is a God of victory. And so if you are looking at him, if you are trusting in him, then you should be moving towards that. There's no right speed, but there's a right direction. Man, so what does it look like to cultivate that? Joy. Joy, just like God's presence, is also communal and it's corporate. It's communal and it's corporate. So last week, Pastor Clayton talked a little bit about community. He asked this question, are you connected? And he wanted everyone to answer it. It was is that not rhetorical? Yeah, it's not rhetorical. You do answer, just not out loud. But are you connected? Okay, well, what does that mean? Well, one of those things is, are you in a community? Have you found yourself in a community of people, which there were 3 R's, regular? Is that a regular thing? Is it once a month? Or less than that, I don't know how much that's really helping you. Is it redemptive? Like, yeah, golf is great, but like, are there redemptive aspects of your community where you are looking at Jesus? You are talking about the things of the Word. You're engaging in that redemptive. It's not just a hangout. Is it relatively small, or are you in danger of getting lost or not being known in that community? So, one of my favorite parts of intentionally pressing into community is being able to realize verses like Romans 12:14. It's where we see joy being communal. It says, be happy with those who are happy, and you'd probably be able to finish it, but it says, and even if it wasn't up there, I'm sure a lot of us would know that. Be happy with those who are happy and weep with those who weep. So there's a Swedish proverb that I saw, and it says, shared joy is a double joy. Shared sorrow is half a sorrow. Shared joy is a double joy. Shared sorrow is a half a sorrow. How big of a difference is there in your mind between sitting at home and watching the Super Bowl or the sports championship of your choice and with a group of people that you really know and really love and being able to watch and celebrate that together? Like how big of a difference? Is there joy in either scenario? Some of you are like, oh, it depends what the team is and it depends if I'm winning. But like you can celebrate in both of those scenarios. Like we can celebrate when Tom Brady leads us to another national title this year. Like we can celebrate that, right? Universe title, winners of the football, the whole existence. So sorry, my bad, my fault. Sorry, Mr. Brady, I apologize for. Good night. I wish you were watching. That'd be cool. No. So what's happening? You can celebrate both of them, okay? There's joy in both. That's the point. There's a point. Joy everywhere. Joy all around. It's communal, right? But like when we're together, man, that is different. See, rejoicing when you are known is exponentially greater than rejoicing by ourselves. So there's rejoicing by yourself, woo, right? There's rejoicing with like-minded people, like woohoo! And then there's rejoicing with people who you've really been able to build a relationship with and who know you. And I'm not just talking about football anymore, like life's wins and joys and things that we want to celebrate. Man, it's so good to celebrate those things with people that know you and that you know. Rejoicing when known is exponentially greater than rejoicing by ourselves. And grieving is the same way. When we're grieving by known, when we're known, it's exponentially better. We feel safe, secure, we feel supported, but most of all, we feel not alone. And so I was doing some research for a mental health series that we're doing in New Life students. Which, by the way, New Life students coming back in January, first Wednesday of January. So if you're a middle of high school, we'll be here Wednesday night, 6:15 every week. Here we go. So, but I was talking to a friend of mine who's a therapist, and she said something that still sticks with me and is so profound. She said that the most helpful thing that you can do with someone who is walking through deep and intense hurts and pains or trauma, like if you're not a licensed therapist and mental health professional, the most helpful thing you can do is simply be there with them. It is not about what you're able to say. In fact, a lot of times that is making the situation worse. It's simply the fact that your presence is there with them. Think about empathy. What is empathy? Empathy is not, okay, this person's fallen down to a pit, so I'm gonna tell you how to get out from up here. Okay, so yeah, reach up on that root, yeah, grab that, and then right foot up, yep, you're doing good, right there on that rock, okay, yeah, and then now reach up, climb, push with the right, yep, now one more, you're doing great. That's not empathy, that's encouragement, that's rooting for them. But empathy is when you see them in the pit and you walk down and you say, you know what? I don't know how to get out from up there, but I'm willing to sit down here with you until you're ready to get out together. I'm just going to be here with you in this moment. My presence is going to be here with you. God's presence with us enables us to experience that joy. See, we can bring joy to people the same way that God brings joy to us, incarnationally. When we are simply with them, our presence is there with them. I mean, when you're sitting there weeping about this thing that you've gone through, and you're able to look over and see somebody who did not experience that thing, but is weeping with you, there's tears coming out of their face because they're feeling the pain that you're feeling, they don't have to say anything. Those tears in their presence say it all. And a lot of times when you weep with someone who weeps, eventually you'll get to rejoice with them when they rejoice, when that situation is resolved. Man, our fullest joy comes from God's presence. Sometimes we need to bring joy to others with our presence in the same way. So we talked about joy is constant. It's always there. But we still cultivate it. Joy is cultivated. It's also communal. We experience it together in small groups and relationships. But joy is also corporate. Joy is also something that we get to partake in places like this. See, every Sunday we gather to joyfully celebrate the victory of our murdered and resurrected King. We come together and we joyfully celebrate the victory that we've experienced as a result of that. You know, I remember when we went online, what was it, Pastor Clayton, 2 or 13 years ago, something like that. I remember the first week, feeling like it felt awkward. It felt like silly. It was weird. I don't know what, it felt kind of sad. I had this, coming in here every single week and being able to joyfully celebrate with one another, and then kind of having to go home and it's me and Paige, my wife over there, and the dog that constantly forces himself in between us. It was just kind of it was weird. I've never been in this environment and raising my hand in worship and being who's watching? Who's watching me right now? You think I'm weird? I've never done that. But we start worshiping at home and I'm praise God from whom I'll keep eyes there or close them or something. I was are you judging me right now? She's yes, of course. I married you. Of course I'm judging you. But it was just weird. I don't know. It was odd. But here's the thing. It was still helpful. I was still getting fed. You ever reheated fries in the microwave, old fries? Anyone ever? Yeah, that's the right answer. Don't do it. Just throw them away. It's not worth it. Throw them away and get that's just bad. It's bad. Don't do it. Now, so it wasn't like that. So props to you, Pastor Clayton. You were still able to feed. You weren't frozen reheated fries. Your sermons aren't just really. I don't know if he needs this right now, but we're making it awkward. It's that's not what it was. But it also wasn't Ruth's Chris. It also wasn't Burn's Steakhouse. You know what I mean? It was different. It was different. It got more normal as it went on, but worship at home was simply never as powerful as worship in a room full of you. Bam, why don't you guys come up, because we're going to worship in a little bit. It was never as powerful. This is Burns. This is Burns. Please understand, gathering corporately is not essential to joyfully celebrating God and all he's done for us. It's not essential. You can still do it. You can do it at home. But it is the best possible way when you can gather together as the saints. And so listen. If you're joining us online, are you joining us online because it is the best, safest, most healthy way for you to join and for you to be a part of TNLC? Or are you joining us online because it's simply the most convenient? If it's the latter, listen, convenience a lot of times, it'll get the job done. It will rarely get the best results. Are you willing to inconvenience yourself to come and receive the fullness of what God has for you? Are you willing to do that? Maybe you're not able to be in the room. I get it. I understand. Are you pressing into community? Are you pushing in and cultivating that community, cultivating the joy that way? Are you seeking out those opportunities? Are you seeking out what does it look like for me to really be connected? How can I do that from here? Because I promise we don't have all the answers, but we want to work with you to figure it out. We want you to be able to connect in the best way, which by the way, if you didn't know, we have socially distanced seating in the back. Is that a way to get you in the room? Would that be a helpful way for you to come and experience what is happening here when the saints gather together? We invite you to come, and if you can't come in this room, we still invite you to passionately worship our God, but to also find ways to really get connected in, to really find community so that you can have joy that's communal and corporate. It's not just on your own, it's not just by yourself. There's just something different about the presence of God in my living room and the presence of God here living through you. It's not a different presence of God, but it is a different joy, right? So like when you can hear Eric on the drum yelling the count, not because it's coming through microphones, but simply because you're in the room. And like if you're online, you heard it because we've got mics, but that's the only reason. There's something different about being here in the room. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna invite you to stand right now because we're gonna go into a time of celebrating. I told you at the beginning it's gonna happen. So we're gonna invite you to come forward. Would you, if you're in the room, would you be willing to inconvenience yourself and come forward? Which by the way, the most joy, I can't physically explain it, but the most joy is like right here. New Life students is like in this area on both sides. That's just where I don't know how it is. But would you be willing to come forward now to take a literal step of faith and move forward and lift up your voice in celebration with the rest of the saints? I'd encourage you to come now.